Hello, everyone. Hope you are well. Wanted to go over a couple of items here this morning. I know the markets are closed, so there's not much news going on, but I wanted to bring a couple things to your attention. And mostly, I wanted to bring this tweet to your attention. And no, it is not this tweet of this compilation of this really cool person that put all of my stick figures together. And actually, believe it or not, she turned this into a t-shirt, which I thought was really super cool. But that's the end game. This gal, I don't know how she did that. She just, I guess maybe Photoshop or something. You can clip all of my little drawings. Geez. You can tell how mature I am, and you can tell what kind of, if you want a glimpse into my mind, this is basically what it looks like. Oh, but the tweet I wanted to share with you is not that one. It's this one. And I don't normally do these tweet threads, if you want to call them that, but I kind of, I don't know if how we even, let me see if I can, oh yeah, okay, good, it comes up, great. So just kind of a thought experiment that I wanted to share with you and get your views on this. I'll probably do a whiteboard video on this tomorrow because I think it's very important. And what we're seeing right now is a speculative mania in a lot of assets, one of which is Bitcoin. And when I say that, a lot of people attack me and say, "Oh, you just don't get Bitcoin." No, I get Bitcoin. Trust me, I get it. It's not rocket science. And I'm not saying, and I'm bullish on Bitcoin. I think, honestly, once you read this tweet, I think it could go to 1 million. But it doesn't mean that it's not in a speculative mania. It's interesting that people have a hard time holding those two thoughts in their head simultaneously. That you can believe now I would never invest because of this, but you can believe that the asset can go up tenfold from here, or maybe even will go up tenfold. But you can also believe that it's in a speculative mania. I don't see how anyone could argue it's not. I mean, you turn on CNBC, that's all they're talking about. That's all the commercials, every commercial is buy Bitcoin. Everyone is bullish Bitcoin. Everybody. My housekeepers are coming over and asking me if they should buy Bitcoin. This is a textbook speculative mania. If you look up speculative mania on like Investopedia or something, I mean, this is exactly what it says. This is what happens. But I still believe that over the long term, it can go way up, and I think there's good asymmetry there. I'm definitely not selling at these prices. So anyway, I don't. That's not my point. My point is to kind of use some game theory and think through how this may play out when we understand the fragility of the U.S. economy and how it has been built over the last, I would say, especially since 2000, but going back prior, where we've just got an economy that's asset prices. That's our economy, asset bubbles. So if you want to use the Keynesian term of aggregate demand, we're moving into this world where aggregate demand is almost entirely based. And so this is where I start. So I'll read it here. If Bitcoin remains a digital asset, not used as currency, I know a lot of people that are commenting on this are getting confused there, and they're not paying attention to the nuance of what I'm saying. If it's never used as a currency, I don't think the government bans it, regardless of the price, because it's not really competing as a digital asset. It's not really competing against the dollar. It's not really. It's like oil. It's the oil could go to a million a barrel, and it's not really competing with the dollar, although it's priced in dollars, I guess. But you see what I'm saying? This Tesla could go to $1 million a share, and they're not going to ban it because it's not really competing with their dollar monopoly or the currency monopoly they have. If Bitcoin were a currency, completely different story, because now it's competing with the dollar directly, right? And that takes away government power. That's where it gets, in my opinion, that's where it gets into the no bueno zone. But assuming that it stays a digital asset, I don't think it'll ban it. Government will ban it regardless of the price. Why? Here's where we go into it. Aggregate demand will soon be almost entirely based on asset prices and stimulus checks. Whether that's in the form of UBI, whatever they want to call it, increased unemployment, welfare, whatever. The average American getting a check in the mail every single month from the government. let's just call it that. The net result. And I think so. Aggregate demand, how much purchasing power people have, is going to be based not on what they produce. Oh no. And obviously this is unsustainable, but it will be based on the asset prices of what they own and the amount that they're getting in the mail from the government. I also see this trend with, Saylor's company and with Tesla potentially continuing. Now, I think Musk is an extremely good salesman and a very, very good marketer. I don't think Tesla is what it is today. I don't think it even exists potentially if Musk wasn't such a good salesman and marketer. Personally, I think Saylor, I wouldn't compare him directly with Musk, but I think he is also a very good marketer and a very good salesman. So, not to say, it's not a knock against him. I think, listen, that's where I made my money in marketing. So I've got a lot of respect for people who are good at sales and marketing. It is what it is, right? So I don't know if you would have corporations where the CEO or the CFO wasn't so much of a marketer. I don't know if they're buying Bitcoin, but I think you could see corporations getting FOMO. I think I think the U.S. government could destroy the real economy to the extent that corporations, their profits are being crushed. And if their profits are being crushed, what can they do to increase their share price? Well, they can buy Bitcoin. So I don't see this happening quickly. I think the figureheads that are running companies that are very good salesmen and marketers might be more prone to hop on the Bitcoin bandwagon here, but maybe it depends on the government. I mean, see, this is what makes it difficult, because now we're starting to try to think through things that aren't really economic, that are more political, and who knows how that can pan out. But if the government does a good enough job destroying the economy, like they did in 2020, and they're continuing to do in 2021, we could get to a point where corporations, their profits are being decimated, and they're like, listen, we got to do something to increase the share price. We'll buy Bitcoin because we know our stock is going to triple if we just make any announcement whatsoever that we're thinking about taking some of our cash position and putting it into Bitcoin. Okay. So kind of imagine this world, right? But then we have to understand that the economy is completely built on asset prices, which would include the share price of these corporations that are now either willingly or being forced, basically, to buy Bitcoin. So if the government comes in and bans Bitcoin, then they know they're going to crush asset prices, which is going to crush aggregate demand, which is going to collapse the economy. So again, if Bitcoin isn't competing with the dollar from a standpoint of currency, if it's not taking away that power from the government, I don't think they ban it, because they know if they do at a certain point, and who knows if we get to this level, right? I mean, who knows? This is more of a thought experiment. But if we do get to that level, then the government knows that if they ban Bitcoin, that's on the balance sheet of every single corporation. And if their balance sheet collapses, their share price collapses, which means pension funds collapse, which means 401ks collapse, which means the economy collapses. So what's the government strategy here? I think if that pans out, they move towards a wealth tax more and more. So think about this. If they're destroying the real economy, which I think the government will do a fine job of in the next few years, income tax won't be that big of a deal. No matter, listen, people forget that the reason why inflation is good for the government isn't necessarily because inflation is good for the government, therefore it decreases the value of their debt. Inflation is good for the government because it increases their tax receipts relative to their overall debt burden. If tax receipts don't go up, it doesn't matter how much inflation you have. In fact, if tax receipts don't go up, inflation would hurt the government because their expenses would increase and the debt would just keep getting bigger. You see, that's the only reason inflation helps the government, because if tax receipts have to go up as a result of inflation. But if we don't have tax receipts go up because incomes from work, which is a huge source of tax revenue, right? So if payroll taxes go down because fewer people are working, less people are getting money from their job, and more people are getting money directly from the government, which may or may not be taxed as income. I think that they get to a point where they're like, listen, we've got to tax wealth, because we're never going to increase our tax revenue with income tax, because we've crushed the economy. We've crushed incomes from work. You see? So, and then I think you're going to have a lot fewer people that are even paying income taxes, is really what it boils down to. So what do? The government has to come out and say, okay, we're going to create a wealth tax, not just on millionaires and billionaires. No. It's going to be on pretty much anyone who owns assets. And I think how the government's going to micromanage this is they're just going to give tax credits to the quote unquote disadvantaged groups, or whatever groups have political favor. So the average American will be taxed on their wealth regardless of what their income is. You could make $50,000 a year and you're going to be taxed on your wealth. So all your Bitcoin, whatever you have, because they know the majority of your purchasing power most likely is going to be coming from the assets you own going up in value because of all the financialization of the economy from the Fed and the government. And again, they've got to figure out a way to increase their tax receipts. So how do you do this while at the same time staying in office? Well, you've got to pander to your base, right? So you've got to give tax credits to these disadvantaged groups. And you guys know the groups I'm talking about. I know I don't need to go into it. Okay, so then what happens? Okay, your assets become tokenized. This, along with a central bank digital currency, will allow government to know your wealth down to the penny, or know exactly what you have, and then they can tax it directly from your Fed account. You see, so the cash is banned, obviously, and we're using central bank digital currency, and then we have all of our assets where the IRS knows exactly how much and where we have, what we own. And then they just do the calculation through what I think will probably be an algorithm. And then whatever the algorithm says you owe in tax will come directly out of your Fed account. The upside is you won't have to do your own taxes. So the main takeaway here is risk asset prices become linked to Bitcoin. Government can't ban it without collapsing the entire system. Wealth tax becomes main source of revenue for government, which it collects automatically from your Fed central bank digital currency account. And then I put here, for the rest of the story, read Atlas Shrugged and The Fourth Turning. Now, here is what most people are missing, because a lot of people assume this means I think that Bitcoin is taking over the world. And it might. It might. But I think, and I'm just thinking, I'm trying to really figure this out in my own mind. But wouldn't it be ironic, and this is my final tweet here, if Bitcoin collapses the entire system, like all the Bitcoin maximalists think is going to happen? But it collapses the system not by taking over the system, but by Bitcoin itself collapsing. Think about that. If all of these corporations load up on Bitcoin, and that's what drives the asset prices higher, at a certain point, all risk assets, or all stocks, let's say, so people's 401ks, pension funds, etc., the S&P 500, is directly linked to Bitcoin, because all of these corporations are holding so much Bitcoin on their balance sheet, because that's the only thing that's been able to move their share price, because the government collapses the economy. So if the S&P 500 is tied to Bitcoin, if Bitcoin collapses, the S&P collapses, the entire economy collapses. And if at that point in time we have moved to even more financialization and micromanagement, central planning, which I think that's the direction we're going, then the entire system just implodes. And so then the next question becomes, okay, what would make Bitcoin collapse? So I think maybe what happens is Bitcoin becomes so powerful and it's on so many balance sheets. And now it's worth, let's say, $1 million a coin. But it's a speculative bubble. It's a speculative mania. And then what happens, and this is, let's say, excuse me, 5 years, 10 years down the road or whatever, then the government comes in, or no, then the free market comes in and figures out a way to actually use Bitcoin efficiently as a currency. Because right now it's not very efficient as a currency. It's really just kind of a digital asset. But then maybe the technology increases. Now all of a sudden we can use it as a currency. So everyone says, oh, forget these dollars and these Fed coins. No. I'm just using Bitcoin because now we can transact. Like, why even use dollars? Doesn't even make sense. Then the government comes in and says, okay, now it's banned. And then you say, okay, well, I'll just move to a different country. Well, that's fine. But remember, everything's tokenized. Everything's going to the central bank. And the U.S. citizens are taxed as citizens, not as residents. You say, okay, well, that's fine. I'll just give up my U.S. citizenship. Fine. I think in 10 years' time, the majority of the developed world will tax will tax you based on your citizenship, just like the United States does now. Now the U.S. is really the only country, other than a small country in Africa, that does that. But I think in the future, especially 5-10 years from now, you're going to see that almost everywhere. So you're not going to be able to get out of that web. And that's where I think this might be going. And again, this isn't really a prediction other than the government collapsing the economy. I think that's pretty much a foregone conclusion. They're doing a great job of that. But this is more of a thought experiment. And it's something that, you can see this potentially playing out when we're just seeing a speculative mania in everything. I mean, stocks, corporate debt. I mean, Bitcoin. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And then interestingly too, if you really think through it, now I'm thinking through it even more. If this were to play out, who would the winner be? In my opinion, the winner's gold. The winner's gold. Again, if this were to play out, and I know a lot of the Bitcoin people say, "Oh, George, you're stupid. You don't get it. Boomer. Duh. Have fun staying poor." And you know what's ironic about people that say that is if you notice on Twitter, the people that say have fun staying poor, they're always poor people that are saying that to rich people. That's the funny thing. They said, you got all these kids in their basement. They're saying that to Schiff. Schiff is loaded. Schiff is loaded. I don't care what Bitcoin goes to. The chances of these kids or whatever that are living in their mom's basement being, having more purchasing power than Schiff is very, very low over the next 5 years. Or they're saying it to they've said it to Raoul for whatever reason. Who knows why? Because he's very pro Bitcoin. They've obviously said it to me. They've said it to, Brent Johnson all the time. They say it to all these people on FinTwit. But again, ironically, they're saying it to people who are extremely rich, and the people saying it are extremely poor. So I don't know. I just thought that was kind of a funny sideshow there. But the whole point is, I think Bitcoin has great asymmetry. I think it's an awesome speculation. I wouldn't be a buyer right now because I think there's way too much emotion. But I do think it could go to 100,000. I think it could go to 1 million based on what I'm talking about here. But I also think that once it gets to 1 million, it could completely collapse. And it could take the whole system down with it. And if it does, I think everyone would just go back to gold. Wouldn't that be just a phenomenal thing to observe? And I mean, talk about a great movie. But anyway, just wanted to go over that, get your thoughts in the comments, give you something to think about on this Monday. Everyone, enjoy your holiday, and I will see you on the next video.